Hey everyone, Nvidia has just announced the latest iteration of their DLSS technology, but there are no improvements to the upscaling, and according to their own publication, the only improvements that have been made are that they've trained the AI a bit more without any actual technical improvements. The only new addition, then, is their use of the new optical flow accelerators to gain more information on the movement in a scene, and they use that to generate additional frames without actually having to render them, which does, as shown in Nvidia's benchmarks, dramatically increase frame rates, but they're very misleading about how it actually works and the drawbacks of using it. As quoted from their website, they say that with DLSS 3 enabled, AI is reconstructing 3/4 of the first frame with DLSS super resolution, and reconstructing the entire second frame using DLSS frame generation. In total, DLSS 3 reconstructs 7/8 of the total displayed pixels, increasing performance significantly. And along with that message, they have a graphic to show what this looks like, and on the surface, it looks like it's upscaling a frame, then taking that information and generating another frame, but that is not what's happening. How the technology actually works is by generating an optical flow field using 2 sequential frames, and then using that, along with the pixels of both frames, to make a frame that is in between those two, as shown in this graphic. On the surface, this looks fine. Higher frame rate and lower latency when compared to DLSS 2, but the difference in latency is not equivalent to if you are actually rendering at that frame rate. And again, note that the upscaling process between DLSS 2 and 3 is not changed, and therefore any issues with ghosting or any other artifacts present in version 2.2 will still be present in the new generation. The improvement with frame generation is entirely in frame rate, and the actual responsiveness of the game, which is a large reason why running at higher refresh rate and frame rate is important, is not improved by this technology, making it practically useless for any competitive game. Once this technology is actually usable and people are able to do their own testing, it will be very evident that it's more beneficial to just turn down your graphics settings if you want good latency, rather than relying on frame generation, as the process of generating new frames will increase the latency, and the latency added by frame generation will only go up the lower your frame rate is. And I do believe that there's a point at which your latency would be above what you'd have without frame generation, because again, as shown by Nvidia, it is creating a frame out of 2 subsequent frames, meaning it's looking at the most recent frame, rendering a new one, and then showing an intermediate frame, and then showing the rendered frame. To keep frame time consistent, this generated frame will need to be shown for as long as a normal generated frame, so the longer your computer is taking to actually render frames, the longer this generated frame will be shown and the higher your latency will be. That is, of course, if I'm understanding everything correctly here. We can't know for certain until people have the hardware and software and can actually do testing. This is just what I've gathered from the information I've been given by Nvidia. Another more anecdotal bit of info I have is that using similar methods to this to increase the frame rate of a video, which is of course exclusively done optically and not with the motion vectors provided by the engine, it does have visual issues, and shown by Nvidia, their methods can be incorrect about what direction pixels are moving in, so this method is not unlikely to add visual artifacting. I think here a more worthwhile use of Nvidia's time and money would have been to improve the upscaling technology in DLSS by adding support for the new optical flow accelerator, which would likely reduce the ghosting and trailing that you see with DLSS now, or just straight up forgo the flow accelerator entirely, as apparently the frame generation could be possible on cards without it, and rather they could have spent that money and die space to improve the raw performance on these cards, because when compared to the leap made last generation, it is pretty significantly lower in quite a few titles. As you can see when compared to the graph from the reveal of the 30 series, the 3070 beats out the 2080 Super by quite a bit, but when compared to the 4080 12GB, which really is the 4070, Nvidia was dumb for naming it that, we can see it fall behind the previous generation when it doesn't have the frame generation to use. That's all for this video. I probably won't make anything else on this reveal, as I've pretty much covered everything I want to, but definitely expect something after AMD's RDNA 3 reveal, where I'll go over what they've announced, hopefully FSR 3.0 as well, along with how AMD is stacking up to Nvidia. If you haven't already seen it, feel free to check out my last video on RTX Remix, which is a really promising piece of tech Nvidia also recently revealed, and I'll catch you guys in the next one. See ya.